The unraveling of Kyle Abbott's carefully constructed life has become one of the most compelling storylines on The Young and the Restless, plunging him into a downward spiral that threatens not only his romantic future but also his role as a father, a son, and a man trying to define himself beyond the shadows of his family name. The collapse of his relationship with Clare Newman has not simply been another failed romance in Genoa City's long history of breakups. It has exposed Kyle's most vulnerable sides, his desperate longing for love, his inability to reconcile truth with deception, and the dangerous possibility that he may exploit the one innocent connection left in his world, his son, Harrison Abbott, in order to salvage what he has already lost. For Kyle, the heartbreak has come in waves, each more brutal than the last, and Clare's decision to step away after uncovering his lies has left him teetering between self-destruction and manipulation, a choice that could redefine his character in the eyes of everyone around him. The history of Kyle and Clare's relationship has always carried the weight of circumstance. It was not a romance born of convenience but rather one nurtured by unexpected bonds and genuine affection, largely sparked through Harrison. Clare's initial presence in Harrison's life gave the young boy stability and joy at a time when the Abbott family was fractured by constant rivalries and betrayals. Harrison adored Clare. She was the one who encouraged his curiosity, who sat with him as he proudly stumbled through his early Italian phrases, and who gave him the kind of nurturing attention that, ironically, Kyle himself often struggled to provide. It was Harrison's affection for Clare that created the bridge leading to Kyle's relationship with her, and for a brief period, it seemed as though fate had aligned to give them all a semblance of family harmony. Yet in Genoa City, harmony never lasts, and the cracks in Kyle and Clare's union were always visible to those who knew the dangerous pull of temptation and the ghosts of past indiscretions. The fatal blow came when Kyle's betrayal surfaced in the form of a kiss with Audra Charles, the woman who had already been a source of chaos in both his professional and personal life. To Kyle, it may have seemed like a fleeting moment of weakness, an act he could explain away or bury beneath apologies, but for Clare, it was a rupture of trust too profound to mend. The setting of Nice, meant to symbolize beauty and escape, instead became the backdrop of a revelation that shredded any illusion of stability in their relationship. Clare, who had already endured the stigma of her past and worked tirelessly to reshape her narrative, could not stomach the thought of tethering her new life to a man who repeated the patterns of deceit she sought to escape. Kyle, blinded by his arrogance, believed he could charm her back, sidestep accountability, and win her forgiveness with half measures and sweetened promises. But Clare saw through the veneer, and her rejection has left Kyle flailing in a sea of his own regrets. It is in this desperation that Kyle now faces a darker temptation, using Harrison as a means to claw back the love he has lost. The bond between Harrison and Clare is undeniable, one of the purest connections in Kyle's fractured world. Harrison lights up in Clare's presence, clinging to her like a beacon of comfort and joy. He sees her not as the ex-girlfriend of his father but as his own cherished companion, someone who listens to him, nurtures his confidence, and makes him feel valued in ways adults often overlook. Kyle knows this bond is powerful, and he also knows that Harrison's happiness could be leveraged as a tool to draw Clare back into his orbit. The question that looms is whether Kyle, in his current state of despair, will allow his paternal instincts to be corrupted by selfish desire, crossing a line that could forever tarnish his relationship with both his son and the woman he claims to love. The danger lies in the subtle ways such manipulation could unfold. Kyle might begin by casually inviting Clare back into Harrison's life under the guise of innocent visits, framing it as being in the boy's best interest. He could play on her guilt, reminding her of the promises she once made to always be there for Harrison, even if her relationship with Kyle crumbled. Over time, these visits could morph into a pattern, with Kyle engineering scenarios designed to stir nostalgia, to remind Clare of the family they briefly formed. The risk is that in doing so, Kyle would not only undermine Harrison's emotional stability, tying his happiness to an uncertain romantic entanglement, but also corner Clare into a position where her compassion is exploited. The moral weight of this decision cannot be understated, for it would transform Kyle from a heartbroken lover into a manipulative strategist willing to sacrifice the innocence of his child for the illusion of control. Clare, for her part, has begun redefining herself in the wake of their breakup. Her commitment to the best single life is not merely an act of defiance but a conscious choice to reclaim her independence. For too long, Clare has been defined by the narratives others placed upon her, the damaged granddaughter of Victor Newman, the young woman haunted by manipulation, the girlfriend who tried to fit into a legacy family's mold. Her split from Kyle is a declaration that she refuses to settle for half-truths and betrayal, that she will not let herself be shackled to another man's mistakes. Yet her bond with Harrison complicates this journey, tugging at her heart in ways she may struggle to resist. She loves the boy, and walking away from him is far harder than walking away from Kyle. This tether leaves her vulnerable, for even as she tries to stand firm, the sight of Harrison's hopeful eyes may weaken her resolve. For the Abbott family, Kyle's unraveling carries broader implications. Jack Abbott, his father, has fought tirelessly to instill a sense of integrity and resilience in his son, but time and again, Kyle has faltered under the weight of temptation and entitlement. Jack, who has endured his own betrayals and heartbreaks, recognizes the danger of letting desperation dictate one's actions, yet he may be powerless to stop Kyle from repeating the mistakes of the past. The Abbotts are no strangers to scandal, but the exploitation of Harrison would be a particularly bitter pill for Jack to swallow, for it would signify not just the erosion of Kyle's romantic prospects but the potential corruption of his role as a father. Meanwhile, Audra Charles lingers in the periphery, the catalyst whose presence has sparked much of this turmoil. To Clare, she represents everything toxic about Kyle's inability to commit, a symbol of temptation and betrayal. To Kyle, she is a reminder of his failure, the embodiment of a moment that cost him the woman he loved. But Audra is not one to fade quietly into the background. Her manipulative streak and penchant for chaos suggest she may continue to weave herself into Kyle's orbit, perhaps even fanning the flames of his desperation. Should she sense his vulnerability, Audra might exploit it for her own gain, further destabilizing Kyle's fragile grip on reality. The unfolding drama raises pressing questions about identity, integrity, and the destructive force of desperation. Will Kyle choose the path of redemption, confronting his flaws with honesty and humility, or will he slide deeper into manipulation, using Harrison as bait in a scheme that could backfire catastrophically? Can Clare truly disentangle herself from the Abbott legacy, or will her bond with Harrison tether her to Kyle in ways she cannot escape? And will Harrison, the innocent heart at the center of this storm, emerge unscathed, or will he become yet another casualty of Genoa City's endless cycle of lies, betrayals, and shattered families? In the end, Kyle's story is not simply one of heartbreak but of choice. At his lowest, he stands at a crossroads where his actions will either condemn him or offer him a chance at redemption. But time is not on his side, and with each passing day, his desperation grows louder, threatening to silence the better angels of his nature. If he chooses wrongly, the cost will not only be the loss of Clare but the trust of his son, the one relationship he can never afford to gamble away. And in Genoa City, where every choice carries rippling consequences, that gamble may prove to be the one mistake from which Kyle Abbott cannot recover. The collapse of Kyle and Clare's romance has been written across Genoa City's skyline like a storm that everyone saw coming but no one could stop, a tragic culmination of weakness, jealousy, and miscommunication that has left their once promising love affair in ashes. From Kyle's feeble attempt at a proposal, a gesture that should have been a grand, heartfelt declaration of permanence but instead landed with the clumsy weight of obligation, to his simmering jealousy over Clare's platonic friendship with Holden Novak, the relationship unraveled in ways that were as avoidable as they were inevitable. Clare, for all her resilience and willingness to believe in Kyle's sincerity, reached her breaking point when the accumulation of lies, manipulations, and insecurities drowned out whatever affection she still harbored for him. The choice to end things was hers, not born of spite but of survival, a desperate need to protect her own spirit before it was eroded completely by the same cycles of dishonesty that had defined too many of Kyle's past entanglements. Yet the end of their romance is not an isolated wound, it radiates outward, touching every corner of their lives, none more so than the innocent heart of Harrison Abbott. For the young boy, Clare had become more than his father's girlfriend. she was a beloved fixture in his daily life, someone who encouraged his curiosity, cheered on his accomplishments, and filled his world with the kind of consistency that is often elusive in the volatile tapestry of the Abbott family. When Clare and Kyle were together, Harrison felt the stability of a united front, basking in the glow of family moments that seemed to bridge the fractures he often sensed in the adults around him. The revelation that his father and Clare would no longer be together is a blow Harrison cannot fully articulate, but one that Kyle is all too aware of, and it is here that the temptation to manipulate becomes most insidious. Kyle has never been one to accept loss easily, particularly when his pride and image are on the line. The shame of losing Clare, especially under circumstances that expose his flaws rather than hers, has left him desperate for redemption. But instead of confronting his mistakes with honesty, he finds himself contemplating a darker path, one in which Harrison's affection for Clare becomes the lever with which he might pry her back into his orbit. The logic is simple, though deeply flawed. If Harrison misses Clare enough, if he is sad enough, then perhaps Clare will feel compelled to return, not for Kyle, but for the child who adores her. It is a dangerous line of thought, one that risks exploiting a child's emotional vulnerability for the sake of adult desire, and yet Kyle, blinded by heartache and desperation, may convince himself that it is justified. The possibility of such manipulation is chilling when examined closely. Kyle could, intentionally or not, frame Clare's absence as a kind of abandonment in Harrison's young mind, allowing seeds of guilt to take root in Clare when she inevitably sees the impact of her departure. He might encourage Harrison to talk about how much he misses her, exaggerating the boy's sadness, or even orchestrating encounters designed to stir Clare's protective instincts. While Harrison is naturally an easygoing child, one who bounces back with the resilience common to the young, Kyle could warp that resilience into fragility by constantly reminding him of Clare's absence, ensuring that any spark of melancholy becomes a visible performance. In this way, Harrison ceases to be a child living his truth and instead becomes a pawn in his father's desperate game. Clare, however, is not blind to manipulation, and she knows too well what it feels like to be used as a pawn in someone else's power play. Her own history has been marred by the machinations of others, and it is precisely this reason she ended her relationship with Kyle in the first place. But her bond with Harrison complicates matters, for her love for the boy is genuine and pure. She does not want to hurt him, and the thought of leaving him adrift is more painful to her than cutting ties with Kyle. If she suspects that Harrison is suffering because of her absence, her resolve to maintain distance could crumble, pulling her back into Kyle's world against her better judgment. The cruel irony is that her compassion, one of her greatest strengths, could become the very tool Kyle wields to undo her independence. For Harrison, the situation is one of quiet confusion. Children, though often underestimated, are remarkably perceptive. He senses tension when adults fight, he notices absences, and he feels the subtle shifts in tone when conversations are laced with hidden meaning. Yet he also yearns for simplicity, for reassurance that the people he loves will remain constants in his life. Harrison has always been a cheerful, adaptable child, one who meets challenges with optimism, but even the most resilient hearts can falter when stability is threatened. If Kyle chooses to fuel his sadness, to prod at his insecurities, Harrison could stumble emotionally, internalizing the conflict as something he caused or as something he must fix. In this way, the cycle of adult dysfunction becomes inherited by a child too young to bear its weight. The question then becomes not only whether Kyle will succumb to this temptation but also what the fallout will be if he does. Should Clare realize she is being manipulated through Harrison, her response could be one of fury rather than forgiveness. The betrayal would cut deeper than any kiss with Audra Charles, for it would signify a willingness to endanger a child's well-being for selfish gain. Jack Abbott, too, would be horrified if he learned of his son's actions, for Jack has fought tirelessly to preserve Harrison's innocence amidst the chaos of their family. To see Kyle taint that innocence would be a crushing disappointment, a revelation that his son had failed to learn the lessons he himself once learned the hard way. In the broader scope of Genoa City, the potential for Harrison to become the catalyst for Kyle and Clare's reunion adds another layer of intrigue. Soap operas thrive on cycles of reconciliation and betrayal, and the possibility of a child's longing reuniting two fractured lovers is a familiar but potent theme. The risk, however, lies in how that reunion is achieved. If Harrison genuinely misses Clare and expresses it freely, it could open the door to natural healing and eventual forgiveness. But if his emotions are engineered, if his sadness is a product of manipulation, then any reunion born of that pain would be tainted from the start, destined to collapse under the weight of dishonesty. Ultimately, the fate of Clare rests on the razor's edge between love and control, compassion and manipulation. Kyle stands at a crossroads, one path leading to growth, where he accepts his mistakes, gives Clare the space she needs, and allows Harrison to process the changes in his life with honesty. The other path leads to corruption, where desperation blinds him to morality and drives him to exploit his son's heart as a bargaining chip. The decision he makes will not only define his future with Clare but also shape Harrison's understanding of love, trust, and family for years to come. And so the question lingers, one that gnaws at the audience as much as it does the characters. Will Harrison Abbott become the innocent bridge that draws Clare back into Kyle's life, or will he become the unwitting victim of his father's desperation, caught in a storm of manipulation that scars him before his childhood has even had the chance to flourish?